Tonight, we travel through the forgotten corners of American history. Long before modern highways and bustling cities, hundreds of small towns appeared across the United States. Some were built around gold mines, others beside railroads, rivers, forests, and factories. Many thrived for a brief moment before quietly disappearing from the map. In this relaxing sleep history documentary, we'll explore the rise and fall of America's lost communities, uncovering the stories of the people who once called them home. From booming frontier settlements to abandoned railroad towns and forgotten mining camps, each chapter reveals a fascinating piece of history now hidden beneath dust, grass, and time. So settle in, relax, and let the gentle stories of America's vanished towns guide you peacefully into sleep. Large-scale settlement. The land felt vast beyond imagination. Travel was slow. Distances seemed enormous. A journey that might take only a few hours today could require weeks or even months during the 19th century. Yet people continued moving westward. Families loaded their belongings into wagons. Merchants searched for new opportunities. Farmers looked for fertile land. Miners chased rumors of gold and silver. Railroad companies planned routes across enormous stretches of wilderness. Most of these pioneers shared a common dream. They hoped to build something new, a home, a business, a future. And from those dreams, thousands of towns would eventually appear across America. Some would grow into major cities. Others would flourish briefly before disappearing almost completely from memory. Tonight, we begin the story of those forgotten places.
The earliest towns often began in remarkably simple ways. Sometimes only a handful of families settled near a river crossing. Other times, a trader built a store in a location where travelers frequently stopped. A few wooden structures might appear. Then a blacksmith arrived. A church followed, perhaps a schoolhouse. As word spread, more settlers joined the growing community. Within a few years, what had once been empty land could become a thriving small town. Life was rarely easy. Buildings had to be constructed by hand. Roads were often little more than dirt paths. Weather could be unpredictable and harsh. Yet these early residents possessed extraordinary determination. Every new structure represented hope. Every arriving family strengthened the community. Every successful harvest suggested a brighter future. Slowly but steadily, towns began appearing across the expanding nation. As settlements expanded, the heart of many towns became a place known simply as Main Street. Here, residents gathered to buy supplies, exchange news, and conduct business. General stores sold everything from food and clothing to farming tools and household goods. Blacksmiths repaired equipment and horseshoes. Doctors treated injuries and illnesses. Hotels welcomed travelers passing through the area. Life centered around these few blocks. The success of the town often depended on the activity found there. On busy days, streets filled with conversation and movement. Farmers arrived from nearby countryside. Merchants displayed new products. Children played while adults exchanged stories. For residents, Main Street represented progress. It symbolized stability in a rapidly changing world. Few could imagine that many of these vibrant communities would one day stand completely empty. Opportunity was the fuel that powered countless American towns. A valuable resource, a transportation route, a nearby river, a fertile valley. Any one of these advantages could attract settlers and investors. Communities often grew quickly when people believed prosperity lay ahead. Some towns doubled in size within only a few years. New businesses opened constantly. Homes spread outward from the town center. Schools welcomed increasing numbers of students. Church bells marked important moments in community life. To residents, the future appeared bright. Growth seemed unstoppable. Yet history would reveal a difficult truth. The same forces that created towns could also cause them to vanish. Industries changed, resources disappeared, transportation routes shifted, and many communities discovered how fragile success could be. At their peak, many of America's forgotten towns seemed destined to endure forever. Residents built homes intended for future generations. Business owners invested their savings. Community leaders planned schools, churches, and public buildings. The future felt secure, but history rarely follows a predictable path. Some towns would disappear within a single generation. Others would survive for decades before entering a slow decline. A fortunate few left behind remarkable traces. Many vanished so completely that only photographs, maps, and scattered foundations remain. Their stories are not merely tales of loss. They are stories of ambition, resilience, hope, and change. They remind us that every community, no matter how large or successful, exists within the flow of history. As our journey continues, we will explore the forces that built these towns and the events that eventually caused so many to fade away. For now, the streets remain full of life. The lights still shine in the windows, and the dreams of tomorrow are just beginning. In January of 1848, a discovery along the American River in California would transform the United States forever. At a small sawmill owned by John Sutter, workers noticed something unusual among the stones and flowing water: tiny pieces of gold. At first, the discovery remained relatively quiet, but news has a way of traveling. And when word spread that gold had been found in California, thousands of people began making plans almost immediately. For many, this was more than an exciting rumor. It was a chance to change their lives. Farmers left their fields, sailors abandoned ships, shopkeepers closed their businesses, families packed belongings and headed west. Some traveled for months across dangerous trails. Others sailed around South America or crossed the Isthmus of Panama. They all shared one dream: to find gold and perhaps become wealthy beyond imagination. Few realized they were also helping create some of the most temporary towns in American history. The speed of growth was astonishing. Locations that had been nearly empty only weeks earlier suddenly became crowded with thousands of hopeful miners. At first, many lived in tents, but temporary camps quickly evolved into towns. Wooden stores appeared, hotels opened their doors. Blacksmith shops, saloons, banks, and restaurants followed. Some settlements expanded so rapidly that residents could hardly keep track of the changes. New buildings seemed to appear every day. Main streets stretched farther into the surrounding landscape. The sound of hammers echoed constantly as workers rushed to keep pace with demand. Every newcomer believed opportunity waited just beyond the next hill. The atmosphere was filled with optimism. Excitement seemed endless. Yet these communities depended upon a single fragile foundation: gold. And as history would later reveal, gold could disappear just as quickly as it had arrived. Life in a gold rush boomtown could be both exciting and challenging. The population often consisted of people from many different countries and backgrounds. Languages from around the world filled the streets. Merchants sold tools, food, clothing, and equipment needed for mining. Hotels struggled to accommodate the constant stream of arrivals. Prices were often surprisingly high. A simple meal might cost far more than it would in established cities. Basic supplies became valuable commodities. Despite the hardships, optimism remained strong. Each morning, miners headed toward rivers, streams, and hillsides, hoping to uncover riches. Most found only small amounts of gold. Some found nothing at all. A rare few discovered enough to change their lives forever. These success stories fueled the dreams of everyone else. And so the crowds continued growing. Eventually, reality began to replace excitement. The easiest gold deposits were often discovered first. As months and years passed, finding valuable amounts of gold became increasingly difficult. Many miners spent more money than they earned. Some moved to newer mining regions where fresh discoveries promised better opportunities. Others returned home. The crowds that had once filled streets and boarding houses gradually became smaller. Businesses noticed fewer customers. Construction slowed. Optimism began fading. For towns built entirely around mining, these changes could be devastating. Without a constant flow of gold, economic activity weakened. The same rapid growth that had created prosperity now worked in reverse, and for many communities, decline arrived surprisingly quickly. Today, many former gold rush towns survive only as quiet reminders of a remarkable chapter in American history. Some have become preserved historic sites. Others remain isolated in remote valleys and mountains. Visitors walking through these places often encounter empty buildings, silent streets, and fading signs. It can be difficult to imagine the excitement that once filled these communities, the crowds, the dreams, the endless search for fortune. Yet, traces remain. A weathered storefront, an abandoned mine entrance, a church standing patiently against the passage of time. These remnants tell a story that extends beyond gold itself. They speak of ambition, hope, risk, and the extraordinary human desire to seek a better future. For a brief moment, these towns stood at the center of America's greatest gold rush. Then, almost as quickly as they appeared, many faded into history, but their stories continue to echo across the landscape, carried softly by the wind through streets that time forgot.
Only a few years after the California gold rush transformed the American West, another discovery captured the nation's attention. This time, the treasure hidden beneath the earth was not gold, it was silver. In 1859, miners in what is now Nevada uncovered one of the richest silver deposits ever found in North America. The discovery became known as the Comstock Lode. News traveled rapidly across the growing nation. Investors saw opportunity. Miners saw fortune. Merchants saw customers. And once again, people began moving toward a distant frontier with hopes of building a better life. The rugged hills of Nevada soon attracted thousands of newcomers. They arrived carrying dreams, tools, and determination. Almost overnight, new settlements began appearing across the landscape. Few could predict how quickly these communities would rise, and even fewer imagined how quickly many would eventually disappear. Among the settlements created by the silver boom, none became more famous than Virginia City. What had once been a small and isolated location rapidly transformed into one of the most important mining communities in the American West. Businesses opened at a remarkable pace. Hotels welcomed travelers from across the country. Banks handled enormous sums of money. Newspapers reported daily developments from the mining industry. Residents enjoyed theaters, restaurants, schools, and churches. For a frontier town, Virginia City offered surprising sophistication. The wealth generated by silver reached astonishing levels. Fortunes were created. Investments poured into the region. Many believed the prosperity would continue indefinitely. The town appeared unstoppable. Its future seemed secure. But history often teaches that even the most successful communities can depend upon fragile foundations. While prosperous towns thrived above ground, much of the real work took place deep beneath the mountains. Mining silver was demanding and often dangerous. Workers descended into complex networks of tunnels that stretched far below the surface. The air could be hot and dusty. Water frequently flooded lower levels. Heavy equipment and unstable rock created constant hazards. Yet, thousands of miners accepted these challenges. The promise of steady wages and potential wealth encouraged people to continue. Each day, ore emerged from the mines and traveled to processing facilities. The silver hidden within the rock helped fuel economic growth across the region. Entire communities depended upon this industry. Shops, hotels, schools, and homes all relied on the continued success of the mines. As long as silver remained plentiful, prosperity seemed certain. Over time, conditions began to change. Mining deeper became increasingly expensive. Extracting silver required greater effort and larger investments. Some deposits produced less ore than expected. Profits gradually declined. Investors became cautious. Workers started seeking opportunities elsewhere. The effects spread throughout the community. Businesses lost customers. Construction projects slowed. Families relocated to regions with stronger economic prospects. The changes did not happen overnight. In many towns, decline unfolded gradually over years and decades. Residents hoped conditions would improve. Some believed another major discovery might restore prosperity. But for many settlements, the peak years had already passed. The boom that built these communities could not last forever. Today, the remains of many silver mining settlements still rest among the mountains of the American West. Some towns survive as historic attractions. Others exist only as scattered foundations and weathered structures. Visitors walking through these places often encounter an unusual sense of stillness. The noise of mining equipment has long disappeared. The crowded streets are quiet. The excitement that once attracted thousands of people has faded into memory. Yet these towns continue to tell important stories. They remind us how quickly opportunity can transform a landscape. They reveal the hopes and ambitions of generations who sought prosperity on the frontier. And they demonstrate how entire communities can rise and fall alongside the industries that sustain them. The Silver Rush left behind fortunes, legends, and remarkable achievements. But it also left silent streets where only the echoes of history remain. As daylight fades over the Nevada mountains, these forgotten towns stand as enduring monuments to a remarkable era, now lost to time.
In the 19th century, few inventions transformed America as dramatically as the railroad. Before rail travel became common, long-distance journeys could take weeks or even months. Travelers crossed rugged terrain by wagon, horseback, or riverboat. Moving goods across the country was expensive, slow, and often unpredictable. The railroad changed everything. Steel rails stretched across plains, deserts, forests, and mountains. Communities that once felt isolated suddenly found themselves connected to distant cities and markets. Merchants could receive supplies faster, farmers could sell crops farther from home, families could travel greater distances than ever before. As railroad companies expanded their networks, something remarkable began to happen. New towns appeared alongside the tracks, and for many years the railroad became the lifeline that determined whether a community would flourish or fade away. Many railroad towns began with a simple station, a train stop to take on water, fuel, passengers, or freight. Soon a small depot appeared, then a general store, a hotel followed, perhaps a restaurant serving travelers passing through the region. As trains continued arriving, additional businesses opened nearby. Farmers moved closer to the station to gain easier access to transportation. Merchants established shops, families built homes, schools and churches soon followed. What started as a small stop along the tracks gradually evolved into a thriving community. The railroad brought customers, jobs, supplies, and opportunity. For residents, the daily arrival of trains became a symbol of prosperity. Each whistle echoing across the landscape signaled connection to the wider world. And with every passing year, many believed these towns would continue growing indefinitely. At their height, railroad towns were vibrant centers of activity. Train stations welcomed travelers from across the country, hotels filled with guests, restaurants served passengers waiting for departures, freight cars delivered products from distant cities. Local businesses benefited from the constant flow of people and commerce. For some communities, the railroad created extraordinary growth. Populations expanded rapidly. New neighborhoods appeared. Main Street stretched farther each year. Residents enjoyed opportunities that earlier generations could hardly imagine. The rhythm of daily life often revolved around train schedules. Children gathered to watch locomotives arrive. Business owners tracked shipments carefully. Families greeted loved ones stepping off passenger cars. The railroad was more than transportation. It was the economic heartbeat of the town. As long as trains continued arriving, prosperity seemed secure. Unfortunately, railroad success could be surprisingly fragile. Sometimes companies built new routes that bypassed existing towns. Other times, economic conditions changed and stations were closed. A single decision made by railroad executives hundreds of miles away could dramatically alter a community's future. When trains stopped arriving regularly, businesses suffered. Hotels lost guests, restaurants served fewer customers. Merchants saw declining sales, families began moving elsewhere in search of new opportunities. In some cases, neighboring towns connected to newer rail lines flourished while older communities struggled. Residents watched as prosperity slowly shifted away. The change was often gradual, yet over time the impact became impossible to ignore. Without the railroad, many towns lost the very advantage that had created them. Today, traces of many forgotten railroad towns still remain across America. Old depots stand beside silent tracks. Weathered platforms wait for trains that will never return. Empty buildings remind visitors of communities once filled with activity and optimism. In some places, only a few foundations remain. Elsewhere, entire streets survive as quiet reminders of another era. The railroad helped shape the development of the United States. It connected distant regions, encouraged settlement, and created countless opportunities. Yet it also demonstrated how quickly fortunes can change. Towns that depended entirely on the railroad often discovered that prosperity could disappear when transportation patterns shifted. Their stories remain woven into the landscape. Every abandoned depot, every rusted rail, every forgotten station tells part of a larger story about ambition, progress, and change. As evening settles across the plains and mountains, the old tracks continue stretching toward the horizon, carrying with them echoes of communities that once thrived beside the railroad.
Long before modern highways crossed the Pacific Northwest, vast forests stretched across the landscape. Some trees had stood for hundreds of years. Others had begun growing long before the United States even existed. Towering Douglas firs, giant cedars, and ancient spruce trees created an almost endless sea of green. To early settlers and entrepreneurs, these forests represented opportunity. The growing nation needed lumber. Homes required wood. Railroads needed wooden ties. Cities demanded building materials for schools, factories, bridges, and businesses. The forests appeared limitless, and so thousands of workers ventured into remote wilderness areas, determined to harvest one of America's most valuable natural resources. Where the loggers went, towns soon followed. Deep within the forests, communities emerged that few people today even remember. For a time, they flourished, but their future would depend entirely on the trees surrounding them. Most lumber towns began with a simple purpose: cut trees, process timber, ship wood to growing markets. A sawmill often served as the center of the community. Around it appeared homes, stores, workshops, schools, and churches. Many residents worked directly in the logging industry. Others provided services that supported the town. Life could be challenging. The towns were often isolated. Roads were rough. Weather conditions could be harsh, particularly during long winters. Yet these communities developed strong connections. Neighbors depended on one another. Families built lives among the towering forests. Children attended local schools. Businesses served generations of workers. Although remote, many lumber towns became lively places filled with activity, optimism, and purpose. As long as the forests remained productive, prosperity seemed certain. Each day, enormous logs emerged from the surrounding forests. Teams of workers transported them by wagon, river, or logging railroad. At the sawmill, the timber was transformed into lumber destination for communities across America. The industry generated jobs and wealth. It supported local businesses. It encouraged additional settlement in previously remote areas. Entire towns depended upon the steady movement of timber. For many years, demand remained strong. New homes, railroads, and cities required vast amounts of wood. The forest seemed capable of supplying that demand indefinitely, but appearances can be deceptive. Unlike gold or silver hidden underground, the timber resource stood visibly above the landscape. And with every passing year, more trees disappeared. Some residents began noticing changes. The forests no longer seemed quite as endless as they once had. Over time, the challenges became increasingly difficult to ignore. The nearest timber had already been harvested. Logging crews were forced to travel farther into the wilderness. Transportation costs increased. Some sawmills processed fewer logs than before. Economic conditions shifted. Certain companies relocated to areas with larger remaining forests. Jobs became less secure. Families began leaving. Businesses struggled to remain open. Like many resource-based communities, lumber towns depended heavily on a single industry. When that industry weakened, the effects spread quickly throughout the local economy. Some towns attempted to adapt. Others hoped conditions would improve. But many communities eventually faced a reality they could not avoid. The forests that had created their prosperity could no longer support the same level of growth. Today, many former lumber towns have nearly vanished into the forests that once sustained them. Buildings sit quietly beneath layers of moss. Trees grow where streets once bustled with activity. Nature slowly reclaims the landscape. Visitors occasionally discover forgotten foundations, rusted machinery, or weathered structures hidden among the woods. These remnants offer glimpses into communities that played important roles in America's development. The lumber industry helped build cities, railroads, homes, and businesses across the nation. Yet the towns that supplied them have faded away. Those resources often faded from memory after their economic purpose disappeared. Their stories remind us of the close relationship between people and the natural world. For generations, communities depended upon the forests. When conditions changed, entire towns changed as well. Now, beneath towering trees and drifting forest mist, the remains of these settlements rest quietly. The sounds of sawmills have faded. The workers have long since departed. But the forests remain, continuing a cycle that began centuries before the towns appeared and will likely continue long after their memories have passed into history. Beneath the hills of Appalachia and other mining regions lay vast deposits of coal that helped power America's industrial growth. As demand increased during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, companies established entire towns near mining operations. Homes appeared almost overnight. Schools welcomed children. Small businesses opened their doors. Railroads connected these isolated communities to distant markets. For many families, coal mining provided steady employment and a sense of stability. Generations often worked in the same mines. Entire communities shared a common purpose. Life revolved around the industry that supported nearly every household. The mines were not simply workplaces. They were the foundation upon which these towns were built. Many coal communities were known as company towns. Mining companies often owned the homes, stores, and facilities used by residents. Families formed close relationships. Neighbors relied upon one another. Church gatherings, school events, and community celebrations brought people together. Although life could be challenging, these towns developed strong identities. Children grew up surrounded by familiar faces. Workers shared stories after long shifts underground. The sense of belonging often ran deep. For decades, these communities appeared secure. Coal remained essential to factories, railroads, and power generation. The future seemed promising. Yet change was already beginning beyond the horizon. Over time, technological advances, economic shifts, and changing energy demands altered the coal industry. Some mines became less profitable. Others closed entirely. Jobs disappeared. Families moved away in search of new opportunities. Schools lost students. Businesses lost customers. Entire neighborhoods gradually emptied. The decline often unfolded slowly. Each year brought a few more departures, a few more vacant homes, a few more reminders that prosperity was fading. For many communities, the industry that had created them could no longer sustain them. Their future became uncertain. Today, traces of these coal communities remain scattered across valleys and hillsides. Weathered homes stand quietly. Abandoned rail lines disappear into forests. Old mining structures rust beneath open skies. Visitors sometimes encounter streets where only a handful of residents remain. The sounds of industry have faded. Yet the memories endure. These towns helped power a nation during an era of remarkable growth. Their stories speak of hard work, sacrifice, and resilience. Though many communities declined, their contributions remain woven into American history. Throughout American history, rivers provided transportation, trade routes, fertile farmland, and opportunities for settlement. Many towns emerged along riverbanks. Boats carried supplies, merchants conducted business, farmers benefited from rich soil. For generations, rivers supported thriving communities. The water brought prosperity. It connected towns to the wider world, and for many residents, life beside the river seemed ideal. Yet rivers possess immense power. The same waters that sustained communities could also transform them forever. Heavy rains, melting snow, and powerful storms occasionally caused rivers to overflow their banks. Some floods arrived gradually, others struck with little warning. Homes disappeared beneath rising water. Businesses suffered devastating damage. Bridges collapsed. Roads vanished. Entire neighborhoods found themselves underwater. For many towns, recovery proved difficult. Residents rebuilt when possible. But repeated disasters often weakened local economies and encouraged families to relocate. Each flood left lasting scars upon the communities it touched. Some towns never fully recovered from catastrophic flooding. Residents moved to safer locations. Businesses closed permanently. Public buildings stood empty. In certain cases, entire communities relocated to higher ground. The original settlements slowly faded from the landscape. Nature reclaimed abandoned streets. Riverbanks shifted. Vegetation covered former neighborhoods. What remained became increasingly difficult to recognize. The towns themselves disappeared, but their stories endured through photographs, maps, and memories passed down through generations. Today, many rivers flow peacefully past places where thriving towns once stood. Travelers may pass without realizing the history hidden beneath the landscape. A field, a forest, a stretch of shoreline, each may conceal traces of a forgotten community. The river continues its journey. The people are gone, yet their stories remain part of America's relationship with water, settlement, and survival. The rivers remember, even when the towns themselves have vanished. During the early 20th century, many communities across the Great Plains prospered through agriculture. Farmers cultivated vast fields. Small towns served surrounding rural populations. Main streets bustled with activity. Banks, schools, churches, and businesses supported growing populations. Residents believed their communities would continue thriving for generations. The land appeared productive. The future seemed bright. Yet a combination of environmental challenges and economic hardship would soon alter the region dramatically. During the 1930s, severe drought affected large portions of the Great Plains. Strong winds lifted dry soil into enormous dust storms. Fields suffered. Crops failed. Families struggled to survive. Massive clouds of dust darkened skies and drifted across entire states. Communities faced unprecedented hardship. Many residents endured years of uncertainty. The conditions tested both individuals and towns alike. Some persevered, others could not. As economic conditions worsened, many families made difficult decisions. They packed belongings into vehicles and wagons. They left homes, farms, and businesses behind. Some traveled west in search of employment and stability. Others moved to larger cities. The departures gradually transformed countless communities. Schools closed, storefronts emptied. Population declined. Main streets that once echoed with conversation became increasingly quiet. The heart of many towns slowly faded away. Today, scattered across the Great Plains, are reminders of towns affected by the Dust Bowl era. Abandoned buildings stand beneath wide-open skies. Old grain elevators overlook nearly empty roads. Weathered signs mark places where thriving communities once existed. These towns represent more than economic hardship. They tell stories of perseverance, adaptation, and survival. They remind us that even the strongest communities can face challenges beyond their control. And beneath the endless prairie sky, their memories continue to endure. The deserts of the American Southwest are among the most striking landscapes in North America. Towering rock formations rise above endless valleys. Ancient mesas overlook winding canyons. Giant cacti stand silently beneath vast blue skies. At first glance, the environment may appear too harsh to support thriving communities. Water is scarce. Summer temperatures can be intense. Distances between settlements are often enormous. Yet throughout history, people have found ways to live in these remarkable places. Native peoples developed sophisticated cultures here long before modern towns appeared. Later, explorers, miners, ranchers, merchants, and settlers arrived seeking opportunity. And across the deserts, small communities slowly began to emerge. For a time, many flourished, but not all would survive. Many desert settlements began because of valuable resources. Some developed near mining operations. Others emerged along transportation routes or around reliable water sources. A few served growing ranching communities. Where opportunity appeared, people followed. Stores opened. Hotels welcomed travelers. Schools educated children. Churches became gathering places. The settlements were often isolated, but they possessed remarkable energy. Residents worked hard to create stable communities in a challenging environment. Every building represented determination. Every well represented survival. And every arriving family strengthened the hope that the town might endure for generations. Life in the Southwest required resilience. Water conservation shaped daily routines. Residents carefully managed resources. Long distances often separated communities from major cities. Supplies sometimes took weeks to arrive. Yet despite these challenges, many desert towns developed vibrant cultures and strong community ties. Neighbors depended on one another. Local events brought people together. Children attended school beneath wide-open skies. Merchants served travelers crossing remote regions. As years passed, some settlements became important regional centers, believed the future was secure. But desert communities often depended upon delicate economic and environmental balances. When those balances changed, the consequences could be significant. Over time, many desert towns faced difficult challenges. Mining operations closed. Transportation routes shifted. Water supplies became unreliable. Economic opportunities moved elsewhere. Residents gradually departed. Businesses closed. Schools lost students. The sounds of daily life became less frequent. Some communities declined slowly over decades. Others emptied surprisingly quickly. Nature began reclaiming what people had built. Wind carried dust through silent streets. Sunlight weathered abandoned buildings. The desert, patient and enduring, slowly absorbed the traces of human activity. The towns remained, but only as echoes of what they once were. Today, forgotten desert settlements remain scattered across the American Southwest. Some stand as preserved historic sites. Others slowly fade beneath the sun, wind, and passing years. Visitors who explore these places often encounter a profound sense of stillness. The streets are quiet. The storefronts are empty. Yet the stories remain. These towns remind us of the determination required to build communities in some of America's most challenging landscapes. They speak of hope, ambition, and perseverance. And they reveal how even the most promising settlements can disappear when circumstances change. As evening settles across the desert, the old buildings cast long shadows beneath the fading sky. The people are gone. The businesses have vanished. But the landscape remains, carrying the memory of communities that once dreamed of a permanent place in the Southwest. Now, only silence remains to tell their story. When many people imagine the American frontier, they picture the Wild West. They imagine dusty streets stretching beneath endless skies, wooden storefronts standing shoulder to shoulder, cowboys riding through town on horseback, stagecoaches arriving from distant settlements. And somewhere nearby, perhaps the sound of a train whistle echoing across the landscape. The reality was often less dramatic than popular stories suggest. Yet life in these frontier towns was fascinating in its own right. During the late 19th century, hundreds of communities appeared across the American West. Some existed because of mining. Others supported ranching operations. Many developed along transportation routes. Together, they formed a network of settlements that helped shape the expansion of the United States. For a brief moment in history, these towns represented opportunity. People arrived hoping to build businesses, raise families, and create better futures. Few expected that many of these communities would eventually become ghost towns, remembered only through photographs and fading memories. The creation of a frontier town often happened remarkably quickly. A valuable mineral deposit might be discovered. A railroad route could be announced. A new water source might attract settlers. Almost overnight, tents appeared, then wooden cabins, then stores, hotels, workshops, and churches. Within only a few years, an empty stretch of land could transform into a thriving community. Main streets became centers of activity. Merchants sold supplies to travelers and workers. Blacksmiths repaired tools and equipment. Hotels welcomed newcomers. Restaurants served meals to miners, ranchers, and railroad employees. At night, lantern light glowed from windows along the street. Conversations filled the air. Residents believed they were witnessing the birth of communities that would last forever. History, however, had other plans. Life in a Wild West town was often defined by routine rather than adventure. Most residents spent their days working. Keepers opened businesses early in the morning. Farmers traveled into town to purchase supplies. Children attended school. Merchants received deliveries. Craftsmen repaired tools, wagons, and buildings. The community depended upon cooperation. Neighbors helped one another during difficult times. Local events brought residents together. Church services, celebrations, and public gatherings strengthened social connections. Although frontier life could be challenging, many residents valued the sense of independence and opportunity it provided. The West attracted people who believed they could build something meaningful through determination and hard work. And for many years, that belief seemed justified. One of the most famous towns of the American West was Tombstone, Arizona. Founded during a silver mining boom, Tombstone rapidly became one of the region's most important communities. Thousands of residents arrived, seeking opportunity. Businesses flourished. Hotels filled with travelers. New buildings appeared constantly. The town became known for colorful personalities and significant historical events. Yet beyond the legends, Tombstone was a real community, filled with ordinary people pursuing everyday lives. Families raised children. Merchants managed businesses. Workers labored long hours. Like many frontier towns, Tombstone depended heavily upon the economic success of nearby mines. And like many frontier towns, its fortunes would eventually change as conditions evolved. Far to the west, another famous settlement emerged. Its name was Bodie. Located in California, Bodie became one of the most remarkable mining towns in American history. At its peak, thousands of residents called the community home. The town featured businesses, churches, schools, and countless homes. Life could be difficult. Harsh winters often tested residents. Yet Bodie prospered for many years. Eventually, however, mining activity declined. Population decreased. Businesses closed. Families moved elsewhere. Today, Bodie remains one of America's best-preserved ghost towns. Visitors can still walk its streets and see buildings that appear almost frozen in time. The silence of Bodie provides a powerful reminder of how quickly prosperity can disappear. The decline of many Wild West towns followed familiar patterns. Mining deposits became less productive. Railroads selected alternative routes. Agricultural conditions changed. New economic opportunities emerged elsewhere. Residents gradually left. At first, departures seemed temporary. A family moved away, a business closed, a few homes stood empty. But over time, these small changes accumulated. Population declined, investment slowed, schools closed, church congregations became smaller. The town that once felt alive began growing quiet. For some communities, recovery never arrived. The decline continued until only a handful of residents remained. Imagine a frontier town during its final years. The streets remain familiar, the buildings still stand, yet something feels different. Fewer people walk along Main Street. Several storefronts sit empty. The hotel welcomes fewer guests. The train arrives less often. At night, fewer windows glow with lantern light. Longtime residents remember busier days. They recall crowded streets, thriving businesses, and ambitious plans for the future. Now they watch as neighbors leave one by one. The community becomes quieter. The pace slows. And eventually, the town reaches a point where its future can no longer be sustained. After people leave, nature begins a slow transformation. Wind carries dust across abandoned roads. Grass grows between weathered boards. Rain and sunlight gradually reshape buildings. Years pass, then decades. The town becomes part of the landscape once again. Travelers may discover forgotten structures, standing alone beneath wide western skies. A church, store, a hotel, a schoolhouse, each serves as a reminder of lives once lived there. The buildings remain silent, but they continue telling stories to anyone willing to listen. The ghost towns of the Wild West continue to fascinate people because they capture a unique moment in American history. They remind us of a period when vast regions of the country were still being settled. They reflect the hopes of people willing to travel great distances in pursuit of opportunity. They reveal how communities rise, flourish, and sometimes disappear. Most importantly, they remind us that history is not only found in famous cities and major events. History also exists in small towns, in ordinary lives, in places that once seemed permanent but slowly faded from memory. The ghost towns of the American West remain powerful symbols of ambition, resilience, and change. Though many have vanished, their stories continue to endure. As evening settles across the deserts, mountains, and plains of the American West, the ghost towns grow quiet once more. The wind moves gently through empty streets. Old buildings cast long shadows beneath fading sunlight. The sounds of daily life have long disappeared. Yet the spirit of these places remains. The dreams that built them, the determination that sustained them, the memories left behind by generations of residents. Tonight, beneath the vast western sky, these forgotten communities continue their silent conversation with history. And as the stars begin appearing above the horizon, the towns of the Wild West remind us that even places lost to time can still tell remarkable stories. Before railroads reached many frontier communities, stagecoaches served as vital connections to the outside world. The arrival of a stagecoach was often one of the most important moments of the day. Residents gathered near hotels and depots. Letters arrived from distant relatives. Newspapers delivered stories from faraway cities. Travelers stepped down carrying luggage, news, and sometimes ambitious plans for new businesses. For isolated towns, these arrivals brought a sense of connection. The wider world suddenly felt a little closer. A dusty road that disappeared into the horizon became a pathway through which opportunity, information, and hope entered the community. Every stagecoach arrival reminded residents that although they lived on the frontier, they remained connected to a rapidly changing nation. Popular culture often focuses on saloons when describing the Wild West. In reality, these establishments served many purposes. People gathered there to exchange news, discuss business, and meet friends. For travelers, saloons offered food, conversation, and shelter from long journeys. The buildings themselves became social centers where information spread quickly. A new mining discovery, a railroad proposal, a change in market prices. News traveled from person to person through conversations held beneath lantern light. In towns separated by vast distances, community gathering places played an essential role in daily life. They helped transform isolated settlements into functioning communities. As frontier towns matured, residents sought stability. Schools educated children, churches hosted services and community events, local governments established rules and services, law enforcement officers maintained order. These institutions reflected a simple truth. Most people who moved west were not searching for adventure, they were searching for permanence. They wanted safe neighborhoods, reliable businesses, educational opportunities, a place where future generations could thrive. The presence of schools, churches, and civic buildings demonstrated that many communities expected to remain for decades. Their residents invested in the future because they believed the town would continue growing. For a time, many were correct. During their peak years, some frontier towns experienced extraordinary prosperity. Main streets became crowded. New construction projects appeared constantly. Banks expanded operations. Hotels added rooms. Businesses competed for customers. Investors arrived, seeking opportunities. Property values increased. Local newspapers celebrated growth and predicted even greater success ahead. The atmosphere was optimistic. Residents believed they were participating in the creation of something significant. Many expected their towns to become major regional centers. The future appeared bright, stable, and full of possibility. Yet beneath the optimism existed a reality that few fully appreciated. Much of that prosperity depended upon economic conditions that could change very quickly. For many Western towns, mining served as the foundation of local prosperity. As long as valuable minerals remained plentiful, businesses thrived. Workers earned wages. Families spent money locally. Construction continued. But mining resources were not unlimited. Over time, extraction became more expensive. Production declined. Investors shifted attention elsewhere. Some companies reduced operations. Others closed entirely. The impact spread rapidly throughout the community. A struggling mine affected every business on Main Street. The decline often began quietly, yet eventually the consequences became impossible to ignore. The town's economic engine was slowing down. In other communities, railroads determined success. A station could transform a remote settlement into a thriving commercial center. But railroads also possessed the power to redirect prosperity. New routes bypassed older towns. Stations closed. Transportation patterns changed. Merchants lost customers. Hotels welcomed fewer guests. Businesses struggled to survive. The trains that once brought life to the community began passing by without stopping. For residents, the change could feel deeply personal. That once symbolized progress gradually disappeared from daily life, and with them went many of the opportunities that had sustained the town. As economic conditions worsened, difficult decisions followed. Families considered relocation. Business owners closed stores. Young people sought opportunities elsewhere. Each departure altered the character of the community. A familiar neighbor moved away. A favorite business closed its doors. A classroom lost students. The changes accumulated slowly. Yet year after year, the population continued shrinking. The town remained recognizable, but it no longer felt the same. Residents began speaking more frequently about the past than the future. Eventually, only a few businesses remained. Perhaps a small general store, a gas station, a post office serving the remaining residents. The streets grew quieter. Many buildings stood empty. Windows reflected sunlight, but revealed no activity inside. Visitors passing through often sensed the town's fading energy. The structures remained. The roads remained. Yet the community that had once animated those spaces was disappearing. History was entering its final chapter. The transition from town to ghost town rarely happened overnight. It unfolded gradually, Years passed, then decades. Nature began reclaiming abandoned spaces. Dust settled across unused roads. Grass appeared between wooden structures. Weather slowly reshaped buildings. The community's physical presence remained visible, but daily life had vanished. What remained was a landscape filled with memories, a place where echoes of the past seemed almost tangible, a place where history lingered quietly beneath the western sky. Today, travelers visit ghost towns seeking a connection to the past. They walk along empty streets. They study weathered buildings. They imagine the lives once lived there. Each structure offers clues. A schoolhouse suggests children learning lessons. A hotel recalls travelers arriving from distant places. A store hints at daily routines and community relationships. The buildings may be silent, but they continue telling stories. Visitors become temporary witnesses to histories that might otherwise be forgotten. The ghost towns of the Wild West represent more than abandoned buildings. They symbolize ambition, opportunity, risk, determination, and change. They remind us that communities are living things. They grow, they prosper, they adapt, and sometimes they disappear. Yet even when a town vanishes, its story remains. The roads may fade, the buildings may collapse, the population may be gone. But the dreams that created those communities continue echoing through history. And beneath the vast skies of the American West, those echoes remain, carried gently by the wind across landscapes that remember everything. Most forgotten towns do not disappear all at once. The process is usually much slower. A business closes, a family moves away, a school loses students, another store shuts its doors. Year after year, the population grows smaller. Many residents leave in search of jobs, education, or new opportunities. Eventually, only a handful remain. Then, something remarkable happens. While most people choose to leave, a few decide to stay. They remain, even when the town's future seems uncertain. They remain when neighbors disappear. They remain when streets grow quiet. And through their presence, they become living connections to the town's past. Across America, many disappearing communities were sustained for years by these final families. Their stories are among the most emotional chapters in the history of forgotten towns. For the last residents, leaving was often more difficult than outsiders could understand. Many had spent their entire lives in the town. Their parents had lived there. Their grandparents had lived there. The streets held memories. The buildings held stories. Every corner of the community was connected to moments from the past. Birthdays, weddings, school events, family celebrations. The town was more than a location. It was part of their identity. Moving away would not simply mean changing addresses. It would mean leaving behind a lifetime of memories. For many residents, that was a sacrifice they were unwilling to make. In many declining towns, local businesses struggled to survive. The grocery store lost customers. The hardware store received fewer deliveries. Restaurants served fewer meals. Yet some owners continued operating long after profitability disappeared. They remained because the town still needed them. The local store often became more than a business. It became a gathering place, a source of information, a symbol of continuity. As long as the store remained open, residents felt that the town still possessed a future, even if that future seemed uncertain. These small businesses helped preserve a sense of community during difficult years. Schools often reveal the changing fortunes of a community. During prosperous years, classrooms were filled with children. Playgrounds echoed with laughter. Teachers guided new generations toward the future. But as populations declined, enrollment numbers fell. Some schools combined grade levels, others reduced staff. Eventually, many closed entirely. For remaining families, the closure of a school often marked a turning point. It signaled that the town was no longer growing. The future generations were becoming fewer, and the community's connection to tomorrow was slowly fading away. Even as populations declined, churches often remained important gathering places. A small congregation might continue meeting every week. The familiar building offered comfort and stability. Residents shared stories, supported one another, remembered neighbors who had moved away. The church became a keeper of memories. Photographs lined hallways. Records preserved family histories. The building itself stood as a symbol of continuity. As long as the bell continued ringing, some residents felt that the spirit of the town remained alive. For the last families, the most difficult experience was often watching the town slowly change. Homes became empty, businesses closed, community events disappeared. Familiar faces became less common. The transformation happened gradually, yet each change carried emotional weight. Residents remembered how things once were. They remembered crowded streets, busy stores, school activities, celebrations. The contrast between past and present could be heartbreaking, yet many continued finding beauty in the quietness that remained. When asked why they stayed, many residents gave surprisingly simple answers. This is home. My family is here. My memories are here. I belong here. For them, the town represented something that could not be measured economically. It represented belonging, identity, connection, history. The value of those things often outweighed practical concerns. While outsiders focused on decline, the remaining residents focused on meaning. They saw not abandonment, but home. As populations decreased, the final residents became unofficial historians. They remembered stories no one else could tell. They knew which families built certain homes. They remembered businesses that no longer existed. They preserved photographs, letters, and memories. Without realizing it, they became guardians of local history. When visitors arrived, these residents often served as storytellers. Through their memories, forgotten towns remained alive. The buildings might be aging, the population might be shrinking, but the stories endured. Eventually, many disappearing towns reached a difficult moment. The final generation grew older. Younger family members often lived elsewhere. The population became increasingly small. Questions emerged about the future. Who would maintain the buildings? Who would preserve the records? Who would remember the stories? For some communities, local historical societies stepped forward. For others, preservation efforts arrived too late. The passage of time continued, as it always does. Every town experiences a final chapter. A last store closes. A final family relocates. A final light goes dark in a familiar window. Afterward, the streets become silent. The buildings remain. The roads remain. But daily life has ended. The town enters history. Yet even then, something remains behind. The memories, the stories, the photographs, dreams of generations who once called that place home. Those things do not disappear. Today, countless former residents still remember towns that no longer truly exist. They remember neighbors, teachers, store owners, friends. They remember summer evenings, school events, holiday celebrations, ordinary moments that once seemed unimportant. Those memories transform forgotten towns into something more than abandoned places. They become emotional landscapes, places that continue existing in the hearts of the people who lived there. And in many ways, that may be the most enduring form of preservation. As evening settles across America's forgotten towns, it becomes easier to understand why some people never wanted to leave. These communities were built through hard work, determination, sacrifice, and hope. They represented dreams, families, generations, lives fully lived. Though many towns have vanished from maps, they have not vanished completely. Their stories remain, their memories endure, and somewhere beneath quiet skies and fading sunlight, the echoes of those communities continue whispering across the landscape. The last families may be gone, the final lights may have gone dark, but the spirit of home remains, and perhaps it always will. When a town disappears, the story does not end. The people may leave, the businesses may close, the schools may fall silent, but the landscape remains. And once human activity fades away, another force begins its work. Nature, patient, persistent, unhurried. Unlike the rapid rise and fall of human communities, nature operates on a different timescale. Days become years, years become decades, decades become generations. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the natural world begins reclaiming the places people once called home. The process is rarely dramatic. There are no grand announcements, no final ceremonies, only quiet change. A seed settles into a crack in a sidewalk. Grass appears beside an abandoned building. Rain softens a dirt road. Wind carries dust through empty streets. Little by little, the town begins returning to the landscape from which it came. Nature often begins with small victories. A patch of grass appears where people once walked. Wildflowers bloom beside a forgotten fence. Birds build nests beneath empty rooftops. Insects occupy spaces once filled with conversation and activity. At first, these changes seem minor. A visitor returning after only a few years might barely notice them. Yet nature is remarkably persistent. Each season contributes to the transformation. Spring brings new growth. Summer strengthens roots. Autumn scatters seeds. Winter weakens structures exposed to the elements. Year after year, the balance slowly shifts. The town becomes a little less human and a little more natural. In forested regions, nature's return can be astonishing. Young saplings emerge beside abandoned homes. Years later, those saplings become towering trees. Branches stretch across rooftops. Leaves cover pathways once used daily by residents. Eventually, entire streets disappear beneath vegetation. Visitors may struggle to recognize where roads once existed. The forest does not erase history intentionally. It simply continues growing. The same trees that witnessed the town's rise may remain long after its decline. Generation after generation, the forest expands quietly, and with each passing year, the boundary between town and wilderness becomes harder to see. Across the Great Plains, the transformation takes a different form. Grasslands gradually reclaim abandoned communities. Tall prairie grasses spread across vacant lots. Fields return to natural conditions. Roads become faint traces beneath vegetation. The wind becomes the dominant sound. Where crowds once gathered, only rustling grass remains. The prairie possesses a remarkable ability to heal. Over time, the landscape begins resembling the open plains that existed before settlement arrived. Human structures remain visible, yet they appear increasingly temporary against the vastness of the surrounding environment. The prairie reminds us that nature often measures time differently than people do. In the deserts of the Southwest, change arrives more slowly, yet it arrives nonetheless. Wind carries sand across abandoned roads. Wooden buildings fade beneath intense sunlight. Paint peels away, metal rusts, structures weaken year after year. The desert does not rush, its patience spans centuries. A visitor might see little difference from one year to the next, but over decades, the transformation becomes unmistakable. The settlement gradually blends into the surrounding landscape. The desert remains. The town slowly fades, and time continues its quiet work. Water is one of nature's most powerful architects. Rain falls upon abandoned rooftops. Streams alter their courses. Rivers reshape shorelines. Floods carry away structures weakened by years of neglect. What people built in a few decades can be transformed by natural forces over generations. Yet the process is rarely destructive in a dramatic sense. Instead, it is gradual, persistent, almost gentle. Nature does not hurry. It simply continues. As human activity disappears, wildlife often returns. Birds nest in abandoned structures. Deer wander through former neighborhoods. Foxes explore empty streets. Small animals occupy spaces once filled by people. The town becomes part of the local ecosystem. Nature adapts quickly. Where residents once planted gardens, wild plants grow freely. Where children once played, animals establish new paths. Life continues, only its form has changed. Even after decades of abandonment, traces of human presence often remain. A stone foundation, a church bell, a weathered sign, a row of trees planted long ago. These remnants serve as quiet reminders. People once lived here. Families built homes. Children attended school. Businesses opened every morning. Communities celebrated milestones and faced hardships together. The buildings may fade. The roads may disappear. But evidence of those lives often endures. Nature reclaims physical spaces, but memory preserves stories. Photographs survive. Letters remain. Maps record locations. Family histories continue. Even when towns vanish from the landscape, they often remain alive in memory. In this way, nature and history coexist. One reshapes the land, the other preserves meaning. Together, they create a deeper understanding of time and change. As twilight settles across America's forgotten towns, the landscape grows quiet. Forests sway gently in the evening breeze. Prairie grass moves beneath fading sunlight. Desert winds carry dust across empty roads. The towns have changed. The people have gone. Yet the land remains. It witnessed the arrival of settlers. It witnessed the rise of communities. It witnessed their decline. And now it continues forward, carrying those memories into the future. Nature reclaims the streets, but history remains woven into the landscape, waiting patiently for those willing to listen. Across the United States, forgotten towns continue to wait quietly beneath open skies. Some are hidden deep within forests. Others rest beside deserts, rivers, mountains, or endless stretches of prairie. Many people pass nearby without realizing they exist. Yet every year, historians, photographers, travelers, and curious explorers set out in search of these lost places. They follow old maps. They study faded photographs. They examine historical records. And occasionally, they discover the remains of communities that once bustled with life. The experience can be surprisingly emotional. A weathered building, a forgotten road, a crumbling foundation. These simple remnants remind us that history is not always found in famous landmarks. Sometimes it survives in quiet places where time seems to have slowed down. Some buildings possess remarkable endurance. Decades after residents departed, they continue standing against wind, rain, snow, and sunlight. Old hotels remain beside empty streets. General stores preserve traces of daily life. Schools stand as reminders of generations of children who once filled their classrooms. Churches continue watching over communities that no longer exist. Each structure serves as a silent witness. They have observed prosperity, decline, abandonment, and the passage of time. Although many buildings eventually disappear, some survive long enough to become powerful connections between the present and the past. Perhaps the most moving reminders of forgotten towns are their cemeteries. Long after homes disappear and businesses vanish, cemeteries often remain. Names carved into stone tell stories of families who helped build communities. Dates reveal lifetimes spent in places now largely forgotten. Visitors walking among these markers encounter a powerful connection to the past. Each gravestone represents a life, a family, a story. Together they form a lasting record of communities that once thrived. The towns may be gone, but the people who live there continue to be remembered. Photographs provide another extraordinary window into forgotten communities. A single image can reveal details that written records sometimes miss. Children standing beside a school, families posing in front of homes, merchants gathered outside businesses, crowded streets during prosperous years. These photographs remind us that forgotten towns were once living communities. The people captured in those images had hopes, ambitions, concerns, and dreams much like our own. For a brief moment, the camera preserved their world. Today, those images help bridge the distance between past and present. Across America, museums and local historical societies work tirelessly to preserve the stories of vanished communities. Volunteers collect photographs, documents are carefully archived, artifacts are protected, oral histories are recorded before memories disappear. These efforts ensure that future generations can continue learning about places that might otherwise be forgotten. Without preservation work, many stories would be lost forever. Instead, they remain accessible to anyone interested in understanding the lives of earlier generations. For some people, forgotten towns are not merely historical sites. They are former homes, places where childhood memories were created, places where parents worked, where friendships formed, where important moments unfolded. Many former residents occasionally return. They walk familiar streets, visit cemeteries, photograph old buildings, and remember a world that once felt permanent. Their visits demonstrate an important truth. A town may disappear physically, yet emotionally, it often continues existing in the hearts of those who knew it best. Today, some ghost towns attract visitors from around the world. Travelers come seeking history, photography, architecture, and stories. Preserved buildings offer glimpses into earlier eras. Guided tours explain how communities developed and declined. Visitors learn about mining, railroads, farming, logging, countless other industries that shaped American history. In an interesting way, some forgotten towns have discovered a new purpose. Although their original economies vanished long ago, their historical significance continues attracting interest. The communities may no longer function as towns, but their stories remain valuable. Old maps often reveal towns that no longer exist. A name appears beside a railroad line. A settlement is marked along a river. A community occupies a crossroads, now surrounded by open land. These maps act as historical snapshots. They preserve moments when forgotten towns still occupied meaningful places within the national landscape. Studying them can feel like uncovering hidden chapters of history. Each name represents real people and real communities, places that once seemed permanent, places that eventually disappeared. The stories of vanished towns matter because they reveal how communities respond to change. They teach lessons about opportunity, resilience, adaptation, and uncertainty. They remind us that growth is not always permanent, prosperity is not always guaranteed, and even successful communities can face unexpected challenges. At the same time, these stories celebrate human determination. People built homes in difficult environments, created businesses, raised families, established schools and churches, and worked tirelessly to improve their lives. Those achievements deserve to be remembered. So what remains today? A few buildings, a handful of photographs, old maps, weathered gravestones, historical records, family memories, and the landscape itself. These fragments may seem small, yet together they preserve remarkable stories. Stories of communities that rose from wilderness, prospered for a time, then gradually faded away. The towns may be gone, but their legacy endures, and as long as people continue telling their stories, they will never be completely forgotten. Our journey through America's forgotten towns is slowly coming to an end. We have traveled across deserts and mountains, across forests, rivers, and endless grasslands. We have visited mining settlements, railroad communities, farming towns, logging camps, and places that once seemed destined for greatness. Many no longer appear on modern maps. Some survive only through photographs and memories. Others remain hidden beneath trees, grass, sand, and time itself. Yet every place we explored shared something important. Each was once home. Each was once alive. And each mattered deeply to the people who lived there. As we reach the final chapter of our journey, we are left with questions that extend far beyond these towns themselves. Questions about time, memory, change, and the nature of human experience. Every town begins with a dream. A family imagines a better future. A merchant sees opportunity. A farmer discovers fertile land. A miner hears rumors of hidden wealth. A railroad company identifies a promising route. A community begins to form. The buildings come later. The roads come later. The schools, churches, businesses, and homes all come later. What arrives first is hope. Hope has always been one of the most powerful forces in human history. The towns we explored were built because people believed tomorrow could be better than today. They invested their labor, their savings, their time, their lives, and for many years their dreams became reality. The towns grew, families flourished, communities prospered. The dream worked, at least for a while. One lesson appears repeatedly throughout history. Nothing remains unchanged forever. Industries rise and fall. Transportation routes shift. Resources become exhausted. Conditions evolve. Generations come and go. The forgotten towns of America simply remind us of a truth that exists everywhere. Change is inevitable. Yet there is something comforting about this realization. Because change does not only bring endings, it also creates beginnings. The same forces that caused some communities to disappear helped create new ones elsewhere. History moves continuously forward. One chapter closes, another begins. The story never truly ends. Although towns disappear, landscapes often endure. The mountains remain. The rivers continue flowing. The forests keep growing. The deserts continue stretching toward distant horizons. Long before the towns appeared, these landscapes existed. Long after the towns disappeared, they remained. In a sense, the land becomes the ultimate witness. It observes generations arriving and departing. It watches dreams take shape. It watches communities rise and fade. The landscape remembers everything. Not through words, not through records, but through quiet continuity. The land remains present while history unfolds around it. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about forgotten towns is that they are not truly forgotten. As long as stories survive, memory survives. A photograph passed through generations, a journal preserved in an archive, a family story told around a dinner table, a visitor exploring an abandoned street. Each act of remembrance keeps part of the past alive. Memory becomes a bridge. It connects people separated by decades or even centuries. The buildings may vanish, the roads may disappear, but the stories continue traveling forward through time. And in doing so, they grant a kind of permanence to places that physically no longer exist. History often focuses on famous individuals, presidents, generals, inventors, business leaders. Remind us that history is also shaped by ordinary people. Teachers, farmers, miners, shopkeepers, railroad workers, children walking to school, families gathering for dinner, neighbors helping one another during difficult times. Most residents of these towns never expected to appear in history books. They simply lived their lives. Yet together, they helped build communities that contributed to the growth of a nation. Their stories deserve to be remembered, not because they were famous, but because they were human. Imagine one final evening in a forgotten town. The sun is setting, shadows grow longer, store owners close their doors, families return home, children finish their games, the streets gradually become quiet. At this moment, no one knows what the future will bring. The town feels permanent, stable, enduring. The residents believe tomorrow will look much like today. And perhaps that is what makes these places so moving. They remind us that people rarely know when they are living through history. Life simply unfolds one ordinary day at a time. Only later do we recognize the significance of those moments. Throughout all the changes we have explored, one thing remained remarkably constant: the sky. Generations looked upward and saw the same stars. Miners ending a long day of work, railroad workers traveling across the frontier, farm families gathering after sunset, children dreaming about the future. They all stood beneath the same night sky. The towns changed, the people changed, history changed, yet the stars continued shining above them all. There is comfort in that continuity, a reminder that even as human stories unfold, certain aspects of the world remain beautifully constant. 10 towns matter because they reveal something fundamental about human nature. People create meaning wherever they go. They build homes, form communities, develop traditions, create memories, and leave traces of their lives behind. Even when a town disappears, those traces remain. The forgotten communities of America are reminders that every place has a story. Every street, every building, every landscape, every life. Taken together, these stories form a richer understanding of the past and of ourselves. And now, our journey comes to a gentle close. The forgotten towns grow quiet beneath the evening sky. The forests sway softly in the wind. The rivers continue their endless journeys. The deserts rest beneath fading sunlight. The mountains stand watch, as they always have. The people are gone. The towns have changed, yet the stories remain. Perhaps that is the true lesson of these vanished places. Nothing lasts forever, yet nothing disappears completely. Memories endure, history survives, and somewhere, beneath wide American skies, the echoes of forgotten towns continue drifting gently through the landscape. Thank you for joining this journey through America's vanished communities. May their stories remain with you, and may the quiet beauty of history guide you peacefully into rest.